my work so far, my professional work has very largely been about policy development and coordination in Malta across the university and the Ministry of Health. So perhaps I am a bit familiar with the context that I'm talking about, and internationalization in higher education, because I am quite involved in internationalizing our curricula back home and make sure that they are internationally friendly, so to say. What am I talking about today? I'll be taking you through an exercise. I keep calling it an exploratory exercise that I'm pursuing in view of exploring whether the tuning projects, the outcomes of the tuning projects, may offer a way forward towards addressing the challenges being faced with regards to there being nurse refugees who do not carry qualifications, verifiable qualifications with them when they enter a host country. That's a picture of the sea in Malta. I've just said I come from Malta, and it's just to recap, it's a tiny island, as most of you would know, in the Mediterranean, and our seas are largely calm, not all year round, but very largely calm, and they provide us much leisure, much beauty, much food and water, but also sometimes very often in the past years, they've been an avenue for migrants arriving through irregular ways, basically by crossing over the calm, kinder Mediterranean seas, very often from traveling down on foot or whatever to Libya, and then crossing over from Libya to Malta, because the countries are very closely geographically. This is a typical scene of migrants who reach the country by sea, overpacked boats, and not the most sophisticated boats that one can think of. I have a few pictures just to put us in the scene of what I'm talking about. The previous picture largely featured with the young men or middle-aged men. Let's not run off with the idea that that is the full picture. These also are pictures of migrants arriving in Malta in the last year. As you can see, they're of all ages and all sexes. And if you look closely, I think they capture what I'm talking about as regards people arriving, individuals arriving, but nothing else but themselves. The lady in the middle picture is barefoot, and the others are not carrying anything except basic clothes items. In fact, the gentleman at the left picture is just wearing trousers, not even a shirt. With respect to people who do not make it, it's an unfortunate reality that we've seen pictures of individuals who have arrived through the waters in an irregular manner through the Mediterranean seas. Some unfortunately did not make it, and these are very sad pictures of what happened, capturing such events. Usually consistently murdered, and usually funeral services are organized by the state and respective NGOs accordingly. All pictures, as noted, have been authorized. The use of such pictures have been authorized by the person who has taken them and kindly shared them with me for the purposes of this presentation. So we're talking about asylum seekers. I'm focusing on asylum seekers mostly in the Mediterranean, particularly so Malta, because as I said, that is where I've come from, and that is where I've been meeting nurses in this situation. Is it a past reality? Is it a present reality, prevalent reality? Is it a future reality? If indeed it is, we can argue till next week, I guess, about all this, hypothetically or concretely. I like to look at the figures, and I'll share you some figures with yourself. These are the Eurostat figures for the last few years. As you can see, 2014, more than 185,000. 2015 on the upper left corner, more than 410,000 asylum seekers registered in the third quarter. And the numbers were just as large in 2016 at 360,000. I think this graph probably gives us a fair representation of whether asylum seekers and refugees are something of the challenge of the past, of the present, or of the future. I will leave the numbers to talk on their own. However, allow me to highlight that the 1,400 is not 1,400, but it is 1,400,000. So it's 1.4 million, just under 1.4 million in 2016. I don't think I need to comment any further about those numbers. Undoubtedly, and I say so with confidently, some of these many thousands are qualified nurses, and I said I would say so confidently because I've been meeting them myself back home in Malta. Many others, of course, would hold various other qualifications, not nurse qualifications. What are the most distinguishable, easily distinguishable realities that are arising from this scenario? One is that some, depending on the lens, the angle taken, do not. Some carry documents, but they're not verifiable. Others have missing documents or a missing document, which is the all-important document. And others would be missing or have documents that are not verifiable, however, and some research needs to be carried out or be tracked down. Documents need to be tracked down, but there are difficulties to search, to access, to reconstruct or retrieve the missing documents that are requested. Some facts to go by, because I surely don't want to depict a scenario where action is triggered by solely by emotions, perhaps, or sentiment upon viewing some of the images we've seen, which capture the realities that I'm talking about. So what do some facts say? For example, I would think it's very interesting to note that in the period from 2004 and 2014, there were at least almost 1,000 refugees in Norway, in Little Norway only. 1,000 were refused recognition because they were missing documentation. So is this a real challenge? Is this an existent one? Is this a prevalent one? I guess such facts lend themselves well towards believing that indeed this is a challenging reality, an existent reality. We also learned that without proper documentation of qualifications, displaced people and refugees are at a serious disadvantage, both with the labor market, within the labor market, and also if they wish to pursue further studies. There is a strong, wide, large, call it what you may, body of evidence, documented evidence, stories, notifications about this happening in many countries, in the media and the academic literature and the news. The third fact I think that we need to put into the picture is that undocumented persons cannot be perhaps addressed entirely collectively, because they vary in need, and moreover, from one thing that I've surely learned from this exercise that I've been pursuing is that they vary across the possibility and also across the willingness of these individuals having authorities in the host country contact authorities in the country of origin or in the region of origin. Sometimes it's not possible to contact the country of origin, and sometimes the individuals do not want the country of the authorities in the country of origin to, or in the country of origin or in the region of origin to be contacted for whatever reasons. I could talk about the reasons, but perhaps it's not the scope of the session here, but we can discuss it later perhaps. Now, I've tried to sketch the context of where and why I'm pursuing this exercise. And now I would like to briefly take you through 4 initiatives which are widely reported and about which information was readily accessible to myself regarding initiatives that have been taken to address such realities. For example, in Germany, there's what the prototyping transfer project has been introduced. It is an opportunity. It provides an opportunity whereby individuals who don't have necessary qualifications can be assessed in a way which will reveal or verify the qualifications that they claim to hold. In Norway, a similar project has been undergoing for a number of years. I would say reasonably successfully, whereby again individuals with missing documentation or with documentation qualifications that need to be verified are asked to undergo, I'm not sure what the right word is, a process which seeks to establish the veracity of the qualifications that they claim to have. In Germany, the project that is undergoing nationwide really stems from an act, a law which was introduced years back. I believe it was 2012. And this, as highlighted in the slide, this law obliges that the competent body shall apply suitable procedures to establish the applicant's professional skills, knowledge, and abilities. And it also stipulates that it can do so in work samples, interviews, or any kind of exam. A report of this, an evaluation of what's been happening since the Act was introduced I found a report put together in 2017, and it reports favorably the outcome of the application or the implementation of the law so far, of this Act so far. But however, very interestingly, I found in the report that indeed Germany is trying to create the evaluation for assessors, it says, is set on a set of technical or knowledge instruments agreed with the federal states. However, further down in the same page, they also confess that the report also reveals that the sets of instruments for the professions of chemist, registered nurse, and physiotherapist are still at pilot stage. So there are no defined criteria in that regard, no tools in that regard yet, which I may note indicates some possibility of tuning being introduced or used accordingly. In Norway, this is the model that Norway uses in its project that's been going on by NOKUT, which is the regulatory body for education. And Norway has basically pulled away the obligation to verify qualifications away from universities, and now this body, NOKUT, actually does this job. And it's a 5-step process. And as you can see, in stage 4, there is an assessment by an expert committee appointed by NOKUT. Once again, how is that assessment carried out when it comes to nurses? That is what I'm trying to find out, whether there's scope of developing a tool which which my hypothesis, if so you may call it, is that possibly the tuning frame, the framework of competences which has been elicited from the tuning projects pertaining to nurses may be used for such purposes in the German context and in this Norwegian context. There seems to be scope for a framework that will guide activities, their processes. I was lucky enough to get in touch with Marina Malgina, who is the director of NUCOT, and she accepted to be interviewed by myself. And I highlighted what Marina has shared, very kindly shared, regarding her thoughts about having a framework that is already established across various contexts, and having this framework guide the assessors in the process that they use. Marina actually said that, and she has seen these excerpts and confirmed that they are consistent with what she said, and that's why I am using them in this presentation today. She said that the availability of a framework which may guide the contribution of subject area experts would be favorable. It would provide consistency and enhance homogeneity across different countries. Such a framework may be available and used across different countries. However, she does note what she says, but the actual registration of a nurse in any country should be the decision of that country. And she explained that what they do to date is that they try and determine the level of academic qualification rather than the content or the fitness to practice of a person. Two other initiatives, I said I'd go through four. I've mentioned two, Greece and Norway. And two other initiatives that are widely reported are Greece, one initiative in Greece, which evolves around the development of the introduction of European qualifications passport for refugees, whereby applicants go through a similar process as done in the Norwegian entity, whereby at the end of the process they are given a document, provided with a document which verifies or otherwise the claims that they say the claims that an individual would say regarding one's qualification. There have been 3 rounds of applications completed to date in this project in Greece, and the outcomes have been reasonably favorable. I will go through them in the next slide. Sorry, the NIC-Norwich website is a website which is a joint initiative by the European Commission, the Council of Europe, and UNESCO. It is immensely resourceful, and even in this case of addressing the need to verify qualifications of people without documents. In fact, it comprises an area, a platform which offers guidance for credential evaluators. What is interesting is that one of the steps noted in these guidelines is step number 3, where they say that the evaluators in any one country should arrange for additional steps. And one of them is to organize an examination or test to allow the demonstration of acquired knowledge, competences, or skills. And this, again, I would have thought perhaps lends itself well to having a framework available for credential evaluators across different contexts as regards nursing. This project in Greece, as I said, is not something that the Ministry of Education in Greece alone is committed to, but it is strongly supported by NUCOT in Norway, the UNHCR, and the Council of Europe. At the end of the process, an individual, an applicant, is provided with such a passport as demonstrated in the slide. It is drawing very much from the concept of the Nansen passport, which came into the scene during the or after the civil war in Russia in the 1920s, whereby stateless people, individuals, were granted a Nansen passport, which returned their eligibility, the possibility for them to travel. The process, as I said earlier, in Greece also is very much a mirror image of, is mirrored on the process in local, and therefore, as you can see, read in step number 3, there is an assessment of available documentation, and then there's a structured interview with credential evaluators. The big question is, how do the credential evaluators go about the interview? Would it help? Is there scope for something as similar to what Tuning has been coming up with through its project, a framework of competencies? Would that enable more homogeneous approaches to such assessments? What has been reported regarding the initiative in rolling out in Greece, which seems to be the most I don't know, widespread, perhaps widespread in the sense that when an individual is issued with a passport, with this qualification, whatever, the European qualifications passport, such qualifications passport has already been recognized in Italy, Norway, the UK, and Greece itself. So its use and purpose is spanning in other European countries. As what Marina said, we've already referred to, the head of education of the department of the head of the education department at the Council of Europe is reported to have said that we need to establish, to be able to assess the qualifications that one may have. The assessment is to be valid not only when the refugee first arrives, but where the refugee may move to. And this again perhaps lends itself well to the concept of tuning, whereby transnational and country discourse or and outcomes are readily available. From Norway, we have had the same reaction. We need whereby it was said that we need simple ways of assessing individuals who can go into employment and education. And it is interesting to note what the representative, the UNHCR representative from Greece, had to say. And she said that refugees are part of a solution and they have qualifications and skills. We need to find a way to identify these specifically. So perhaps, yes, this suggests that yes, the passport, the European qualifications passport, is indeed a step in the right direction, but now we need to have the specifics of different subject areas perhaps being more possibly extracted and verified. All this is not happening in a vacuum. All this is happening, all this activity. I just gave you 4 examples of initiatives that are around so far, but I'm sure there are many. I'm not sure, but there may be many. I acknowledge that there may be others that I have not encountered or explored enough so far. But this is all happening in the light of the Lisbon Convention, which was first introduced in 1997, but by 2014, 50 countries had signed this convention and 53 had ratified it. What does it say? Article 7, that reads, I think. Article 7 reads that, I go through it, each party shall take all feasible and reasonable steps within the framework of its education system and in conformity with its constitution to develop procedures designed to assess fairly and expeditiously whether refugees, displaced persons, and persons in a refugee-like situation fulfill the relevant requirements for to access education and to further higher programs or to employment activities, even in cases in cases in which the qualifications obtained in one of the parties cannot be proved through documentary evidence. So really, this does not leave much space for countries to do otherwise, and to, I can't really say that it does not, it obliges countries to address the challenge that I'm seeking to highlight today. I will leave it to yourself to check which countries, which are the 53 countries which signed up. And this is always interesting to see how different countries behave in such regards. What is common across the 4 initiatives? There's an assessment component, there are credential evaluators, however, there are no mechanisms available for specific subjects. Now, I've talked about the theoretical, the political, inverted commas, sides of things, the policy side of things. I will go very swiftly through some case studies, stories, call them what you may. Just to clarify, we're talking about asylum seekers and refugees here, not migrants, as in regular migrants. I'm sure we appreciate that there's a difference between both, and there is a universal definition of what a refugee implies. I'm sure we are here talking the same language. I have 4 brief snapshots of circumstances which depict what I've been talking about. You're done is I have permission for each one of them, written permission for each one of them to talk about them, including the details. An Eritrean nurse, 22 years experience as a nurse in her home country, has received little bits of qualification, trained as a nurse in home country, bits of qualifications from European Commission, USAID, Save the Children in UK, so established NGOs. However, she ended up in Malta over the seas without any documents in hand, and 3 years later, she's still unable to register as a nurse in Malta because it has been, to date, impossible to track down any of the documents back in Eritrea, particularly so because the university where she trained, the college where she trained, is not in existence anymore. It was destroyed in a fire during the war. Similar parallel journeys. Hafsa Haidar, 28 years old, graduated from Somalia, graduated from Mogadishu University. However, still did not make it onto the nursing register in Malta. In fact, she works in a production line in a pharmaceutical company. She has documents at hand, but they are not verifiable because any attempts to communicate with the university back home in Somalia have been unsuccessful. Kimmi is a Syrian refugee. This is a story that has been long, the details of which I have gathered long ago and kept, and I have returned to her to talk to her only 2 weeks ago. I met her as early ago in the 1990s. I am very old, and I was already a qualified nurse at the time. And she came from Albania at the time when Albania was going through very difficult times, and was denied the permission to work as a nurse because it was not possible to verify her qualifications there. What she told me on the day when we met to explore her situation, it still resonates in my head because of what Sigrid was. They were very powerful sentences. She said, "We are not simply refugees. We came here to work. We are nurses." Last one, Maria Cassar. She is from Sierra Leone, came to Malta quite a few years ago, was denied permission to work as a nurse, went into training, retrained from scratch as a nurse, only to be moved to Holland as a reallocation exercise by the UNHCR. And was once in Holland, she was once again denied permission to work as a nurse because of language challenges, had to wait, worked in Holland for 5 years as a carer, gained eligibility for a EU passport and returned to Malta, and is now working as a nurse in Malta, only because she had trained in Malta. I have the story about a surgeon, which is a different context, and I'm highlighting it for a reason, which you will very soon see why. Dr. Ayman Mustafa, he is Syrian. His story has been very widely documented. If you were to Google him, you'll find documentaries about his story all over the place, including with an interview with Angelina Jolie as part of her UNHCR most ever patronage. He came to Malta as a fully fledged surgeon, however, was unable to work because of missing documents, and he was given the opportunity to work to carry out supervised practice for some time, after which he was allowed to be registered as a surgeon and work in the public service. There's a picture of his dear wife and daughter, which he asked me to pull up alongside his picture. Unfortunately, his wife and daughter did not make it. He was the sole survivor of the family to Malta. When I interviewed him, he very kindly accepted to be interviewed because I asked him to share his thoughts about his experience, and because his experience was successful in the sense that he managed to seek registration, despite the fact that the country, Malta, never managed to track down his documents, his missing documents. And whatever is highlighted, I think, is what is most striking. He said that when I asked him to share his thoughts about the availability of a framework, he had that to say. Basically, that he would have very much preferred should a framework had been in place, because, as he notes here, he is very happy that indeed and grateful that people the Malta and the Maltese authorities accommodated his request and found ways of dealing with his situation, but a formal, structured approach would have been his preference, particularly so for the reason he pointed out at the start, will hinder the perception of having any favor or special treatment given. He appreciates that he has special treatment given, and he's grateful for that, but sees some drawbacks in that. What are the implications? The implications are what they are. We need to address the rights and requests of these people. Perhaps there's an opportunity in sight for if such people without documents, nurses without documents, are given the opportunity to register and work. There is an obligation to safeguard patients. There is a need for healthcare professions to care about each other, and there is clearly need for political will and commitments to address this. Is this a local challenge, a European challenge, a global challenge? If indeed it is, can tuning be an effective avenue? I tried to figure out why may tuning, to substantiate why this idea, why this exercise, as to why may tuning be able to address this, provide an avenue towards addressing this challenge. I don't think I need to go through what tuning is about with the three of you, because you all know, and I would think that you agree with what's on this slide, because it's basically lifted, not plagiarized, but I tried to tweak it a bit from documentations and arising from the Tuning Academy. We all know that tuning seeks to go across countries. How can tuning help in order to address this challenge? I carried out an exploratory exercise, not a research study. And what I did is I put that statement to a few people. The next slide depicts who, and I asked them to share their views about the statement on the top, and to share their thoughts and to possibly highlight the feasibility and challenges. I did clarify that we're talking about refugee people who are seeking a refugee status and what a refugee status is, and the resource at hand was always the documents pertaining to the tuning project. These are the people, the key informants, and they were leaders in the tuning projects pertaining to nursing. They all kindly, very willingly accepted to be interviewed, some face-to-face, some through Skype, some through correspondence. snapshot of the replies. I'll be here tomorrow if I had to go through everything. So this kind of, I tried to get the gist. There was a favorable response to, yes, tuning frameworks may perhaps be addressed, but I'd like to draw your attention to the last quote from Professor Mary Gobby, and who, with much wisdom, and explained that the approach may not work, won't work because of the directive, and also highlighted the fact that tuning is about graduate level education. So it's probably addressing graduate nurses, and not all countries are develop graduate level nurses. Is it feasible? The general opinion was feasibility should not be a problem, as depicted in the first quote, and there was much reference to the Kalohi project, because the Kalohi project, tuning project, is referring to focuses on the assessment processes and the gap in the existent processes in Greece, Norway, wherever, is how is the assessment carried out. So although there was a favorable opinion about the thoughts channels towards the statement as to whether tuning can be used in this regard, there were some queries. There were, however, some queries, most relating to the EU directive. How would this exercise or this initiative of using the tuning frameworks fit into the European directive? And also, are there other compounding factors, such as language proficiency, that always needs to be factored for? I've put one of the final slides, the wise advice that Marina Malgina, who, as I said, is an authority in this field because she leads the projects in Norway and in Greece, which is relevant to countries beyond Greece itself. And she says that she advises that any initiative has to have these important factors. So perhaps if we would like to look at using the tuning competency frameworks in this regard, we need to see how many of those boxes can we tick. The Kalohi framework is a study I don't think I need to go through, because I'm sure you're all familiar with. I simply highlighted that the EU-funded project sought to answer the questions of above by developing an infrastructure which will eventually make it possible to test bachelor's and master's performance Europe-wide in a way that satisfies the needs of various stakeholders, which lend itself well to the scope of this exercise and to the challenge that I am pursuing. And obviously, I am nearly half a century old, so I am more than aware that there are diverse and challenging arguments and opinions towards what I have been pointing out in this presentation today. There would be opinions that embrace the idea that it's their problem, not ours, so why should anybody be bothering with this? We have to safeguard the patients. There's the call for it would encourage further irregular migration. We need to be fair with the documented professionals. If we're going to start allowing people without documents to enter a profession, what about we need to be just with the ones who have a document, and there is not a political will, so there's not enough political will, and so it's a waste of time. Or perhaps there is political will but inadequate resources to fill them in, and I'm sure there are many other arguments that we can come up with. Therefore, where does that leave me and this exploratory exercise? I'll try and choose to continue to be inspired by this quote that I have come across many months ago from Mr. Ayman Arabi, who leads the UNHCR work in Yemen, who said, "You are dealing with people who are not giving up, so why should you?" Therefore, things remain in progress. The project, this exercise that I have initiated, I would think I'll do my level best to keep it in progress. What are the next steps that I can think of is exploring the views of the architects and the directors of tuning, which perhaps this is getting a step closer to that. Exploring the views of the European Union the European Commission. I've identified the persons through a meeting I had with our MEPs, members of the European Parliament, one of them, who advised that these are the two people who perhaps I should try and track down and talk to, and also share thoughts. And he has kindly introduced me with them, and I'm waiting to hear for them and their availability or to talk with me. And also, we, as advised in one of the comments by Professor Gobi earlier on, there seems to be much scope to exploring the view of regulators in Europe. I have made contact with regulators in Malta, which was obviously very easy, and I have also established contact with the regulator in France, who is willing to be interviewed, and that is being organized. With Italy and Portugal, I've kind of in progress to making significant contact and getting anywhere close to having an interview organized, obviously, and I will remain searching for other contacts in other countries. I think that is all for me.